kind of a bad thing. It's like, my thing is that like a lot of those guys that are getting married, like younger, like especially in high school, they're living like in parents' basement. They're like spending their year apart.
Isn't that the dream? Yeah. A lot of people from my high school, well, it almost seems like people took one of two paths. You either went to college or you got married. The amount of people who got married, you're shaking your head yes over there. The amount of people who got married right out of high school, well, it's large, put it that way. And it's weird seeing them like on Facebook and things like that, and their kids are like out of like in college. I'm like, oh my gosh, like that's. I mean, I think I'm freaked out that my oldest is 13. Then I look at them and they're like, oh yeah, my oldest is 30, retiring. Things are strange. So maybe people are putting off marriage, but maybe not because it's kind of a mix. What else is different? And it's interesting you mentioned the thing about the basement because that's where we're going next. We're not going to your parents' basement. Anything else that's different about you guys, your generation?
About relationships or in general?
Yeah, really. That's what chapter 9. Chapter 9 is literally called relationships. So just relationships in general.
I feel like I know we talked a lot about this in MFT, but a lot of people like aren't moving out of their parents' house like immediately, and that was used to be such a thing. Like the moment you would graduate, you would be on your own.
Yeah.
It's like not a thing anymore. And I feel like I know this one couple right now, and like the son is like not the son, the younger brother is like just like a year or two older than me, and he lives with his older sister, and his older sister is married. Well, they're like about to get married. They get married in like a couple months, and I'm just like waiting to see like what happens. Like, are they gonna kick them out once they get married? Like, weird.
That's different. That's definitely different. I don't know if that's a trend or not.
I just feel like it's so like not common anymore to like try and live on your own.
Just move out.
Try and stay as long as possible.
Well, why don't we start here then? That's a nice segue. What both of you guys said. So, just a few things that are new. These are in your book. They're kind of scattered around, but this isn't all that's new. In fact, we'll cover some stuff that's new about your generation today. But number one is something called boomerangs. You guys, in psychology, we love putting people in boxes and labeling them. And yes, this is your generation. And you guys are part of something called the boomerang generation, which I am thankfully not a part of. Anyone know what this means? I mean, this is a term that's been out there now for a while. But it's going to apply just in general to about 30% of people in your generation. What's that?
Go back home.
Yeah, what this means is you have moved out. And by moved out, I don't just mean, hey, I went to college with plans of coming back. This means you've made an attempt to move out. Like Calista said, you move out on your own. You've made this, so you're gone. You're in your own apartment, your own house, whatever it is. Maybe you even got married and you're gone. Maybe you're living with your sister. But either way, you're gone. But for some reason, you end up coming right back where you started. And you're back in your old high school room with the trophies and the ribbons and whatever it is. This will be covered in a little bit more detail later on. But the boomerang generation. Something else that's new that I'm part of. Well, actually, I'm not part of it, and I hope I'm not. But this is affecting my generation. People my age, the children of the baby boomers, I guess that's who we are, is part of the sandwich generation. What the heck is that? I love these names. Yeah. Exactly. If you're part of the sandwich generation, it's about 20% of people around my age, a little bit older actually, 5 or 10 years older than I am. What this means is you're taking care of both generations. You're taking care of tiny people over here, and you're also taking care of older people over here. But this doesn't mean fun grandma lives with you, goes to Vegas every weekend, and hey, we love living with grandma. No, this means grandma who needs some type of round-the-clock care, just like a baby would. So some people are taking care of 2-year-olds and 82-year-olds in their household at the exact same time. And then you guys are also part of a new phenomenon, which I have to deal with every semester. I'll never name names. You might not even know who you are. But every semester, all of us, I'm not sure how many professors share this with you, but we get emails, we get calls that we can't really respond to for legal reasons, but asking about your grades. Hey, this is what I want my daughter to take. This is what my son should take. This is what his major should be. Helicopter parents. Helicopter parents is a relatively new phenomena. And this is parents who are just, we're call them that, is they're just hovering. And they make a lot of decisions for their kids. I've had some students come up to me after we talk about this. This is towards the back of the chapter. Parents who have come to interviews with their kids, like real job interviews, if the parents are there. Wow. But there's this law, maybe you've heard of it, called FERPA. I can't even tell your parents when they do call or when they do email, which they do. I can't even tell them if you're in my class or not. It's your information. And we have this conversation, and they seem shocked that you're an adult. And you're actually making your own decisions. So that's just a few things that are new. But a lot of what's up here is also new trends as well. So years ago, let's make a little pie here. Let's say this is all the families, all the households, I should say households in the United States. Years ago, and by years ago, I mean literally years ago, like the 1960s, 1950s, about 55% of households were made up or looked like something called the nuclear family, also called the modern family, which is interesting because it's not modern at all, although I guess at the time, that's what it was. We have a major here called Human Development and Family Science. HDFS programs have been around for years and decades at colleges and universities, and they actually would teach you that this is what you need to have. If you took a family development class, you would learn in class that this is how families are supposed to look. And if you divert from this, you're opening the door for mental illness, for abuse, for kids who won't succeed in life. So the nuclear family was literally shoved down Americans' throats and said, this is what you need to do. What the heck's that? What is this? What's the nuclear family? And on the surface, there's nothing wrong with having a nuclear family. If that's your dream, go have it. But what is it? Ever heard of this? A nuclear family, again, on the surface, there's nothing wrong with it. A nuclear family is when we have a man, we have a woman who are married. They have children who live in the home. And the male is the breadwinner, the sole breadwinner who leaves the house, and the mother is the figure that stays home and raises the kids. And that's her full-time job. If you ever have spare time, this isn't the family therapy class, but there's a film in that class we usually watch it like 5 minutes of called A Date with Your Family. It's from the 50s, and it was literally made by, listen, remembers, it was made by an HDFS program at the University of Massachusetts to help teach you how to have a nuclear family and how important it is. Is there anything wrong with this? No. If that's what you, I don't care what your family, what you want your family to look like. But what's wrong with that is when we started teaching people this is what you need to do. And if you deviate from this, there's trouble. So does the nuclear family still exist? Of course it does. If you knock on Households and Alliance, you come across, but how many? What would you suppose? It's not extinct. So the nuclear family is still out there. It's just certainly not 55% of households today. In fact, I was thinking on Monday, I can't think of one friend, one person I know, one adult who has textbook nuclear. I don't know anyone. I don't. Not that there's anything wrong with it. About 5%. About 5% of households today are what we would call the nuclear family. In fact, the landscape today kind of looks like this. You break it up into like 18, this is not the scale, by the way. You can break it up into 18, 20 different pieces. But if you did knock on all the doors in Alliance, good luck with that. Stay safe. And you were keeping track of, hey, this is what this household looked like. This is what this house. What would be the biggest chunk? In other words, today in the United States, and this is new, what is the most common household out there? What's the makeup? What's it look like? And it makes up about 21% of households. Any guesses?
Parents working.
So maybe we got married people with kids, but now both, right? So even that defaults to nuclear family. I think that's probably why the nuclear family doesn't exist so anymore, because who the hell can have one breadwinner? And I hate that term, by the way. Children brought home pumpernickel. Congratulations, Father. Anyway, but I have 3 jobs. My wife has 2 jobs. Like, come on, no one's a single breadwinner anymore. No, that's not it. Any other guesses? The most common household today is a married couple with no children at all. That's the most common household that we have today. But we give a name for households today. In fact, today we just call families the postmodern family. And what we mean by that is, in the United States, there really is no quote-unquote normal. And this is not a bad thing. But today there is, what we mean by that is there's no chunk, there's no type of household that makes up the majority anymore. They're all about that. Maybe some are 5%, some are 10%, some are 20%. But our most common one is married couple without kids. And I kind of deviated a little bit here just to throw this out there. You can just shout it out. How many of you would like to reproduce? Make little copies of yourself. Fantastic. How many would you like? How many tiny people?
1.
Fair enough. Anybody else?
No more than 3.
No more than 3. You put a cap on it. No one wants a litter? So on Monday, so you guys are, maybe you're more modern than Monday, Team A. But on Monday, everyone was like 3 or 4, and that's actually when we ask people, you're like, no. The funny thing is when we ask people in your situation, and when I say your situation, I don't know about your personal lives, but I mean people who are not yet married and not yet with children. Young people who haven't entered that phase of their life typically say anywhere from 2 to 4 when we ask them, how many kids would you like? But something happens, and this is kind of a new trend. Once you do get married, when we ask you years later, how many kids would you like if you haven't had them yet? The most common answer today is just 1. People only want 1 child. This is a new trend in the US that has administrators at places like Mount Union losing sleep because people aren't having kids. And if there's no kids, there's no people to come to college because there's no one graduating from high schools. And this is a big difference. People are having, so 2 trends. People are having, well, 1 trend, people are having fewer and fewer kids. What about marriage in general? This number, have you ever heard the idea that marriage is dying? Have you heard this? A lot of, maybe it's divorce, we'll get to that too. A lot of it has to do with this number, 50%. A lot of people see this number and they conclude, well, yep, it's true. I've heard it, and this has to be true. 50% is the amount of adults 18 and over who are currently married in this country. Only half. I think I'm the only adult in the room who's married. But no, the reason this is important is this is the lowest it's ever been in the US. So fewer adults right now are currently married. That's the key. But is marriage actually dying? Far from it. Actually, and the follow-up number is what's important. When we ask people your age, and in your situation, again, assuming you're not married, would you like to get married? 90% of you say, yes, absolutely. And when we follow you, and just make sure you get the vaccine because that's how we're tracking you. But when we do follow you out into your 40s, about 90% of adults end up getting married in the United States. So most people that are young say, yes, absolutely, I want to get married. And by the time you're in your 40s, about 90% of us have been married at least once. And that's the key. So this number, why is it so low? Well, there's these numbers below it are really important. Also, you were right. What's happening today is most people are waiting a lot longer than they used to get married. 28 and 30 are our average ages. In other words, if you're worried, I haven't met the one yet. You have almost a whole decade before you're even at the average age when people get married for the first time in this country. And this is a huge departure from even 20, 30 years ago. The generation above you, the average age was about 21, 22 when people got married. So we're pushing it out way further. So that's one reason this number is so low, this 50%, because people are just putting off. In other words, there's a whole pool of adults who are not married yet because they're just waiting. And the reason, you don't need to write this down, but the reason they're waiting, by the way, is what you're doing right now. People who get more educated wait longer before they get married. But the other number, what's the other reason that's so low? At 50%. It's kind of a theme of this class, I guess. Has a lot to do with people living longer. Yeah.
I would just say because younger generation's way longer, and the older generation have mostly are married and less divorced, are all like dying.
Well, this sounds so sad. Well, but the main reason is we're living a lot longer, and so we have a lot of women specifically. We'll cover this, I guess, in the online portion, but we have a huge amount of women in this country today who are 80 plus who are widowed. So they're currently not married. So those are two numbers. So in other words, we have a lot of adults on the older spectrum who are not married for various reasons. Maybe they did get divorced, but their spouse also might not be living anymore. And we have a lot of young people who are putting off marriage. So when we survey a sample of adults, only about half of them are in that sweet spot where they're still or currently married. You keep bringing up this divorce idea, which is bad. What do you think? What's the divorce rate in this country? Might as well get that out here. We ended up talking. I don't remember how we ended up talking about this.
I heard it was like 54%.
Jesus, where did you hear that?
I forget. Some class covered it a little bit. I can't remember, but I just remember them talking about like a lot of it's from like the push, like when you get older, like staying at college, you try to rush into it because you feel like your time clock's running out, so you force it.
My God, your time's already running out when you're in college. All right, let's just cover these numbers now because they're going to come up eventually. So, does anyone know what the actual divorce rate is? MFP person? I think you're the only one.
I don't remember.
You don't know. This was like 6 weeks ago.
That's what I said.
It's okay. If it was from exam one, you're allowed to forget it. The divorce rate in this country right now is about 29%. Yes. And it's been 29% for about 3 or 4 decades now. And to add to that, there's nothing phenomenal about the United States and our divorce rate. In fact, that divorce rate, about 30%, is about the divorce rate in every country that does marriage like us. So Europe, Asia, et cetera, et cetera. So in most industrialized, modern societies that do marriage like us, with divorce laws, et cetera, that's about what we see. Does anyone know where this idea, because I hear it all the time, and I still hear it on the news and talk shows, people will just almost proudly say it, like they're happy they know this fact of, oh, the divorce rate is 50%, which makes marriage sound pretty scary, by the way. Like, why would you want to get into it if it's a coin flip? Does anyone know where this number comes from? Because there was a time when the divorce rate was 50% in this country. It didn't last very long. I'll just write this down. You don't need to write this down, but this is good information to know. It was right around 1979. And the divorce rate in this country spiked big time. And it went up to about 50%. And I'm assuming this is where most people get this, oh yeah, the divorce rate, I've heard it's 50%. What the hell happened in 1979? What the heck was it? World War II?
I saw it.
That was like in the 40s. Well, we had Vietnam, so Vietnam was ending, but something very practical happened. Ladies, no one's taught you this, because this impacted mainly you and your life. There we go. Something called no-fault divorce laws were passed in this country. So let's go back. This might seem bizarre to you. We're just making a nice collection of things here on the preschool. This might seem absolutely bizarre, but before we passed no-fault divorce laws, which, by the way, this means you can get divorced today in the United States, well, in most states. In Ohio, you can get divorced for irreconcilable differences. That's it. You don't need a lawyer. You don't need a judge. You can do the paperwork, and you and your spouse can get divorced in other words, we just don't want to be married anymore. That's called a no-fault divorce law. Of course, it doesn't always work out that simply. But getting divorced is really easy. In fact, you can go to Barnes & Noble and get a divorce take-home packet. I'm not making that up. I can't find it. I used to have this picture in Vegas. It was hilarious. On one side of the street, there was a drive-in marriage place, and on the other side of the street, there was a drive-in divorce. And both were like equally long, the lines. Before 1979, to get a divorce, ladies, well, and men, you had to prove in a court, you actually had to go to court and prove in a court of law that your spouse was either trying to kill you, had abused you physically, sexually, and emotionally, or was unfaithful in your marriage. You actually had to go to court and prove this. In other words, your spouse had done something nefarious against you. Is going to court cheap? Is it free? Oh my God. And what if you lose? And going to court is a big deal, hiring lawyers. In other words, before this, it was really, really hard for people to get divorced. So what happened? We passed no-fault divorce laws, and yeah, of course we had this spurt, because we had this whole country full of people who really didn't want to be married to their spouse anymore, and they finally had it out. So we had this whole big spurt, and then it settled down, and now we are where we are. Although that's not the end of the story with divorce. There's more to this. So the divorce rate's about 30%, but it depends on choices that you make and when you get married. It turns out the age at which you get married is really, really, really important. But I don't want to give everything away just yet. Tell me about if you do want to get married, and that's a personal choice. You don't have to get married, but even if you don't want to get married, maybe you do want to get in a relationship. Tell me about your perfect partner. Who do you want to marry? What are you looking for? The personal questions. I know it's 9:15 in the morning. Nothing. I said nothing. I have no idea. Sense of humor. Someone who's laid back. Someone who gets me. Nothing? You've never given this any thought? Well, the fun thing is, without knowing you or much about you, I can predict with pretty good accuracy, in fact, about 85% accuracy, I'm going to know 5 things about the person that you're going to marry. Because about 85% of people in this country practice something called homogamy when they get married for the first time. That's the key. Just so I can shut up for 2 minutes. It's kind of something like this. Oh, if I can find. There we go.
Hey, Charlie, look out! Are you okay?
Yeah, thanks. Oh my God, you saved my life.
Maybe some kind of reward for that?
Oh,
You should be a lot more careful crossing the street, otherwise you could die, if that bothers you.
wow.
See, to me this is a waste.
What?
The shirt you got on under your sweater. It sits in a drawer for 3 weeks waiting to come out, and when it finally does, it only sticks up half an inch out of your collar.
I'm Jerry Seinfeld.
Jeannie Steinman.
Hey, same initials. How do you like that?
I like it. Ladies,
No, I don't.
unusual.
Yeah.
And for you? I'll have a bowl of Cheerios, not too much milk. Good. 2 bowls of Cheerios. You too?
Yeah.
Hey, did you hear the bank on the corner is offering $100 if you go in there and they don't greet you with a hello?
Oh, really? That's nice.
What's with you?
I think I'm in love.
Oh, come on.
No, it's true. This woman saved my life. I was crossing the street. I was almost hit by a car. And then we talked, and the whole thing just seemed like a dream.
If a guy saved your life, you'd be in love with him too.
No, this woman is different. She's incredible. She's just like me. She talks like me. She acts like me. She even orders cereal in a restaurant. We even have the same initials. I just realized what's going on. Now I know what I've been looking for all these years. Myself. I've been waiting for me to come along. And now I've swept myself off my feet.
Oh, that's pretty much how it's going to work for you. This might sound boring. Oh, just wait till we get to that scary woman. Yes, you're going to see her in your nightmares tonight, I promise. All right, so all of you in this room, well, most of you in this room, are going to practice something called homogamy, and that's what it sounds like. It sounds terribly boring. You thought you were going to marry someone from France or Mexico or something somewhere exotic or someone so different than all the people that you grew up with, when the reality is you're probably going to marry someone very much like yourself, but in 5 really key ways. What would you suppose this is? And it has nothing to do with hobbies, by the way. So, your future spouse.
Scent.
What?
Scent.
Scent? No, that's not on the list. It's very possible your future wife or husband might stink or use a different shampoo. Let me get the ball rolling. So maybe you can see how practical these are. The first one is age. So you're probably going to marry someone, and we even know the ballpark. You're probably going to marry someone anywhere between 2 and 3 years, either below you or above you. Yeah.
Well, maybe the same race or ethnicity.
There we go. So see how the ball's rolling. Same race or ethnicity. That's a big one. Not same initials. Anything else? I'll keep it going. Also, it's unfortunately the princess almost never marries the pauper. She marries a prince, the pauper marries another pauper. No, the SES stands for your socioeconomic status. Long story short, you're probably going to marry someone from the same tax bracket. So age, ethnicity, socioeconomic status. What else do we got? 2 other big ones.
Religion.
Yay! So let's change it a little bit. Let's say spirituality. Because it could also mean a lack of religion. And by this, we don't mean like exactly the same. I mean somewhere in the ballpark. So lots of Catholics marry Lutherans. That's pretty much the same thing. They're when the Virgin Mary, you got the same thing. What I mean is people typically of really different faiths don't get married. And then one last one. This is the one that usually deflates people's balloons. Oh man, really? Anything? Location, geography. You're probably going to marry someone from the tri-state area. Now, do some people cheat this? Of course they do. And this isn't some code that you're seeking out. For whatever reason, this just sort of happens. It's just kind of where you're at. But if you do cheat this on just one of these, you have what's called a heterogamous marriage. And when people get married for a second or third time, heterogamy is typically what happens. So first marriages, we practice homogamy. Second marriages, we practice heterogamy. And that simply means you're different in just one way. It could be 4 ways, but even if you're just different in one way, you technically have what we call a heterogamous marriage. Now just some, you have to write this down. So MFT people, don't give it away because you know the answer. There's one of these. So I'm a marriage and family therapist. So some part of what I do is talking to couples who are having issues. There's one of these types of heterogamous marriages that has the worst prognosis. In other words, cheating, homogamy in one of these ways has a higher divorce rate than the other. What would you suppose that is? Yeah.
Would it be the economic status?
It's not. Why, out of curiosity, what made you say that? What do you think? What are you envisioning?
I feel like people sometimes have issues over money and how much they.
Oh yeah, that does happen. Maybe that's why we marry someone from the same tax bracket, because we have the same issues and we understand each other in that way. Let me tell you a little story, which will give away the answer. When I was at the Ohio State University, one thing that I love doing, which I tried here when I first came, there's just not enough of you getting married. But I had a premarital therapy workshop. It was great. In other words, these were college kids, so people aged anywhere from 18 to 21 on campus who were engaged. And if you didn't know, when you get married, regardless if it's like a priest, a rabbi, or even the guy that you know who got his "I can marry you" certificate on the internet, anyone who's going to marry you, most people require you to get some kind of premarital therapy before they sign off on your marriage certificate, whatever it is. So that was kind of the deal. And how it worked is I would see couples in a group kind of setting. We 3 couples at once. We had 5 sessions, and we talk about everything, from kids to sex to religion, all that stuff. The idea being, let's talk about things now, so 10 years from now, we don't have an issue, right? That was kind of the whole idea. Like, let's talk about all this stuff that gets in the way of people's marriages. The very first time I did this, we had one couple, and I always go like this because they sat over to the right. They were so annoying. I mean, they were nice, pleasant couple, that even the other 2 couples that were coming to the group were like, geez. And the reason they were annoying is because they had everything worked out. They told me from the first session that the only reason we're here is just so we can complete the program, get our certificate. We've talked about everything. There's really nothing that you're going to bring up that we haven't worked out. Ding, little glow in their eye. And it was true. They had literally worked everything out. Now, the phenomenal thing about them, the thing that I remember the most, is that he was a Catholic. And when I say Catholic, I don't just mean, oh yeah, I'm Catholic, go to church on Christmas. No, he was a practicing, I go to mass every week, takes it very seriously, Catholic human being. His wife was Jewish. And I don't just mean, oh yes, we're Jewish. What does that mean? I don't even know. No, she's practicing Jewish faith, so we had 2 people from very different faiths who were both very much alive and practicing in their religion. And they were coming together. Not only that, because you might think, well, what about, it's fine for them. Their families got along. Their families loved this idea, which surprised me. And get this, their wedding ceremony was going to be some kind of joint, Catholic/Jewish ceremony. The priest and the rabbi had agreed, oh yes, we'll do it part Catholic and part Jewish. It'll be fantastic. And they told me all about the little traditions they were going to do. I'm like, I have nothing I can teach you at all. You've literally worked everything out. Until 15 minutes to go, session number 5. So we're literally saying goodbye, passing out the little certificates, congratulations, go on your way, get married. Little guy sitting over here, he was from couple number 1. He just kind of leaned over at the end. He's like, I've been wondering this whole time, when you have kids, are they going to be Catholic or Jewish? And like clockwork, the guy said Catholic, and the woman said Jewish at the exact same time. And the little man, the husband, future husband over here was like, oh. He backed up, no. And then their faces turned beet red. And I was even like, oh shit, we found something. We found something. Isn't this amazing? They had worked everything out. And this funny thing about religion and spirituality is it's really easy when you don't have kids to look at each other and say things like, I respect you. I know you're a different faith, but I love you so much. That doesn't matter to me. We can get married. Oh, no, but I love you and I respect you. But when it comes to kids, there's something, especially, think of someone you know, and maybe it's you, who's hardcore in your religion. You're hardcore for a reason, right? And you want to pass this on to your kids. There's something about the kids that throws a wrench in this whole idea of we can work it out. It's interfaith marriages. Interfaith marriages have a much higher divorce rate than other marriages on this list. And it has nothing to do with the early days when you're getting together and everything's fine. It's when kids start coming into the picture. And this is when the argument starts to happen. What do we do? Most religions, at least the hardcore ones, have some kind of end game built into them, meaning if you don't believe this, you're going to a bad place later. And what parent wants their child to do that? So this is what starts to mess things up. And by the way, I shouldn't advertise this like it's some kind of like 80% divorce rate. It's like 5-6% higher. So it's not like some crazy number. But statistically, interfaith marriages have a harder time than the other one. Now this is new stuff, kind of for your generation. But before we get to this is where I'm going to insert someone into your nightmares. What is cohabitation? There's actually something new for the MFT people on this. I don't want to assume everyone knows what this is. Cohabitation, maybe you've heard of it. Yes? Cohabitation simply means you're living with someone that you're currently not married to, but you're in a relationship. So, you think cohabitation is a good idea. Well, just wait.
She's gonna tell you now.
Yeah, I don't remember. I honestly don't remember when or how I found this video. It was from my early days, here, and I just Googled cohabitation, and it said the truth about cohabitation. I was curious what this little person. I have no idea who she is. I have no idea why she made this video. I mean, I've got some ideas, but it's mainly for entertainment purposes. It's called The Truth About Cohabitation, but nothing she's going to tell you is true. But I guess that's what makes it so funny. But anyway, keep that face seared in your mind.
So, you think cohabitation is a good idea? A lot of times when a couple has been dating for a while, they decide that they should move in together and live together without being married. It's called cohabitation. After all, you're in love, and living together is a good way to get to know each other better and to test out the relationship. And besides, everyone is doing it, right? Well, here's what you haven't been told about cohabitation. Here are the facts. First of all, cohabitation does not necessarily lead to marriage. In fact, 40% of unmarried couples who move in together break up within 5 years. Modern researchers deny a correlation between cohabitation and divorce, but previous studies have found that couples who cohabit before marriage have a higher rate of divorce than those who do not live together before marriage. And if you have kids while you're cohabiting, the results can be disastrous. Consider the facts. Children born to cohabiting couples experience a 170% higher rate of having their parents break up before they are 12 years old than children of married couples do. In addition, children of cohabiting parents are more likely to have emotional and social problems, including drug use, depression, and dropping out of high school. Also, children in cohabiting households are at least 3 times more likely to be physically, sexually, or emotionally abused than children from intact marriages between their biological parents. These statistics show that children suffer from having parents who cohabit. And sadly, this is not rare. Currently, more than 40% of children in the United States spend time in a cohabiting household. Ultimately, the decision is up to you, but the statistics are clear. The truth is, cohabitation is creating unstable families, and that's a fact.
Robert Wilson.
I know. I think one of my favorite parts, I just realized it, is like the red smoke.
Yes, I just noticed at this time.
I don't know why, because I'm always so fixated on her. Like, just once I'd like the camera to like bump into her. Like, I wonder if that happened like during the the outtakes or something like that. But of course, the red smoke is there to indicate, Satan, I guess, behind you. Because if you grew up in my household, cohabitation was also known as living in sin. That's how it was always pronounced. And true story. So my wife and I cohabitated before we got married. We're doing fine, by the way. As far as I know, we haven't abused our kids yet. But I'll never forget, I didn't know this was a thing, engagement parties. Did you know that was a thing? And that was a new thing. I had never heard of this before. I knew about the bachelor party. I knew there was a bachelorette party. But I never knew about this thing called an engagement party. But they wanted to throw one for my wife? Sure. And it was down in her hometown. And my uncle was there. And it was like just for the women. So the men were out doing something else. I remember driving with my uncle. We don't really see each other that much. We don't really have much in common. But I was just sitting in the back. It was kind of a quiet moment. Just kind of, no one was really saying anything. And out of nowhere, he just turns around. And he wasn't joking. He's like, so, how's it been living in sin for the past 6 months? Like, oh, God, asshole. Like, that's just, but that's how that's the family I grew up in. But anyway, cohabitation, living together. This is kind of a new thing, I guess. What's new is how many people are actually doing it. So about 60% of married people today, right now, say they cohabitated before they got married. This is astoundingly higher than it was even 20 years ago, when the number was only about 12 to 15%. Now, we also know the divorce rate hasn't budged at all. Yet, about 6 times the people are cohabitating before marriage. So I guess we don't really need to do too much statistical analysis to see the impact is almost nothing, if not nothing. But when we follow people, actually had one of those numbers completely reversed. When we look at people for 3 years, so maybe, we could always look a little bit longer, but when we watch couples for 3 years, from the day they move in, here's what we see. About 40% of them end up getting married. About a third of them have no change in their relationship whatsoever. In other words, they're just still cohabitating. They're not married yet, they haven't broken up. And about the rest, about a quarter, have split up. So that's the trend that we see with cohabitating couples. A chunk get married, about 40%. A third of them, there's about no change at all. They're just still doing whatever it is they're choosing to do. And then a quarter of them have gone their separate ways. This idea of a cohabitation effect, which is something that gets talked about a lot, depending on who you're talking to, the cohabitation effect is the myth that cohabitation somehow increases the divorce rate. It turns out there are 4, we'll get to the 5 and why I'm saying it that way. There's 4 really distinct types of cohabitators. Not all cohabitation is created equal. And there's one that by far outnumbers the rest. And first of all, I can say that overall the cohabitation effect is not a thing. But there is one, if we zoom in and pull out one type of cohabitator specifically, suddenly we see a cohabitation effect. Yeah.
Does this have anything similar to do with room? They always say when you're going to college, you have room with your best friend, because you end up not being friends. They always say don't room with college too. I don't know if it's kind of a similar thing to that.
I don't know. I've never heard that advice. I didn't room with my best friend. They didn't allow that at Ohio State. They picked your roommate for you.
A lot of friends broke up.
Well, that's sad. Relationships ending left and right. Well, before we get into this, the 4 different types, maybe you've never lived with your best friend. There's something just in general about humans that we've known since we've been studying humans. How many of you, most of you have a roommate, right? Or have had a roommate, I'm assuming, and maybe someone that you maybe have never lived with before, even if you've known each other really well. Just keep this in mind, the first 6 to 12 months of actually living with another human being is by far the most difficult time in terms of accommodating to that person. In other words, even if you've known the person your whole life, you're going to find out things about that person that you just didn't know. Habits, whatever, how they live, whatever it is. So just keep that in mind. Our first type of cohabitating couple is what are known as trial cohabitators. What do you suppose? In other words, we ask them, we knock on the door, excuse me, why are you cohabitating? Like, what answer do they say? Like, why are they living together? These people, by the way, make up the vast majority of this number. So that 25% that split up, most of those are these folks. The trial cohabitators are cohabitating because they have this idea that, well, let's see if we can live together. Let's see if we're suited for each other. Let's see if we're compatible. And then if we are, then we'll get married. They say things like, well, we don't want to make such a big decision unless I know that we can live together. Just and intuitively, this seems to make a little bit of sense, but step into that person's brain for a second. What are they looking for constantly, consistently? Okay. And what are they looking for? Are they looking for harmony, or are they looking for potential problems? Exactly. And if you're looking for problems, you're going to find them. Trust me. I don't care who it is you're moving in with. The first 6 months or so, you're going to find and have a lot of situations. And if this is your mindset, boom, what happens? They split up. First sign of trouble, they hit the eject button. See, I knew it. Nope, we weren't compatible.
Why didn't they get married in the first place?
These people don't.
Okay.
These make up that number, almost not completely, but they make up the majority of that number. And there's more to that as well. Then we also have, actually I have a good example of this in my life, the dating cohabitators. Dating cohabitators are people who are not engaged. They've never seriously talked about marriage. They're literally just a dating couple. And they decide, for whatever reason, well, I know exactly the conversation because I've watched it happen. Jeff and Kate. I have really good friends, Jeff and Kate from Hudson. They're now married. They've been married now for like 21 years. They have 3 beautiful children. But when I met them, they were just Jeff and Kate, the couple. And about a year or so after knowing them, they became Jeff and Kate, the dating cohabitating couple. They didn't know if they're going to get married or not. But they kept saying things like, well, I'm always over at his house, or I'm always over at her house. Why don't we just move in together and keep it simple? Because we're always together anyway. And they were always together until they moved in together. And it wasn't until about 4 years after that where they finally said, you know what, we'll get married. They were not living together to see if they were compatible. They were literally just a dating couple. So that's our dating cohabitating. Then we've got people who are in the substitute cohabitating pool. And these are the people that say things like, I don't believe in the institution of marriage. I don't need to get married to show you that I love you. I hate using celebrities as examples because they're celebrities and they live in a different universe than us. But one of a classic example of this case was Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt. Remember them? For years they said things like, there's like interviews of them saying things like, we don't believe in the institution of marriage. That's a man-made thing by Western culture. I love her and I don't need to. And what happened? They ended up getting married. And then finally, we've got the biggest chunk, the committed cohabitators. This, incidentally, is where my wife and I fell into. Committed cohabitators are people who plan on getting married. They might be engaged. They don't necessarily have to be engaged, but they have had the discussion. They are going to get married. For us, it was like a timing thing. We never said, like, let's cohabitate. Like, no, it just happened. You guys probably know how this works because you're in college and maybe you've signed leases and contracts. The timing was just weird. She actually owned her own condo. And I was just a renter. I had an apartment sort of close by. And it was at that weird time where I had to sign a contract or not to keep living where I was living. And if I would have signed a contract, it was like for 12 months. There was no way out of it. And why in the hell would I sign a contract to pay rent for 12 months when in like 6 months I'm going to be moving there anyway? So it was like, well, let's just move in now. Okay. Half the family, heart attack. But anyway, that's it. So the cohabitation effect. Is this a thing? Technically, yes, but only for one group of people, and it's who we call the serial cohabitator. Serial cohabitators, you might guess, are people who have cohabitated with more than one person. when these individuals get married, they have a slightly higher divorce rate. And again, this is nothing astronomical, like a 65% divorce rate or 80%, whatever it is. I believe it's about 40 to 50%. And those are the only individuals who have a higher divorce rate. And by the way, this also only works if both people have been serial cohabitators. So in other words, the cohabitation effect is only true for two parties, both of whom who have lived with probably 2 or 3 people in the past. And again, is it some kind of astronomical, oh my gosh, you're going to get divorced? And it's not, I don't know. What's always bugged me about this is it always gets pitched as there's something about cohabitation that will ruin your marriage. And that's just not true. It's not the cohabitation itself. But there's probably something different about the mindset of someone who's lived with multiple people before they've gotten married. I don't know, but it's not the cohabitation in and of itself, because that seems to have no effect whatsoever. Actually, getting a little bit further with you guys. The team, and then we'll keep going. We've got a few more minutes. Last but not least, we'll talk a little bit about those kids. Now, one of these numbers you already know. The one is the average amount of kids married couples today say that they would like to have. They don't want 2 or 3 or 4, they only want 1. And the 1.9, does anyone know what this is? This is also a historical number because it's the lowest it's ever been in our country, too. Ladies, you should know this because it's all about you. No idea? 1.9 is our current, I love this, I always feel a little bit uncomfortable saying this. It's our total fertility rate. What this means is, this is the average number of children that a female in this country will produce. 1.9 for the child, and then most of the child. And it's in other words, a couple messages have already come across, trends that are new for us. People are really postponing marriages. People want a lot fewer children than they ever did before. And people are having fewer children than they ever have before in this country. I don't know if teachers, professors talk to you about this kind of stuff. And I'll preface this by saying Mount Union's going to be fine. But in 2026, colleges have been waiting for this, they've known about this for a long time, and they've been preparing things. Not sure if you've noticed, things have suddenly changed here at Mount Union over the past 5 or 6 years. We've added things like engineering and a nursing program. And why are we adding some of these things? Because we know something's coming in 2026, and it's called the graduation cliff. There's about to be a huge drop-off, specifically in Ohio, but country nationwide, so not just Ohio, in the number of people graduating from high school. They're just not there. The numbers are not there because these trends started about 15 to 20 years ago. And by 2026, the number of high school graduates is just going to go in the basement. What does that mean for colleges and universities? There's no one. We already fight to get people to come to Mount Union, right? Especially a small private institution. Where's the bodies going to come from? You can't just start having kids now. We can't just produce students out of thin air, right? We need the students to come, and if they're not there, but again, Mount Union is going to be okay. They've been preparing for this for a long time, but I can tell you, in the next 5 or 6 years, just keep an eye out. You're probably going to see some places that exist today that aren't just simply going to be around because they're not in good shape, they're not in a good place financially, and there's no way they're going to survive the cliff that's coming in about 5 or 6 years because they're just not in a good spot. But anyway, we'll just toss this out there. Well, actually, no. There's no reason to start this. There's only 60 seconds left. But we at least started the conversation about kids. So, again, I didn't want to do a discussion forum post or a quiz or anything like that. It's going to end the stream because the exam's looming out there, especially if you haven't done it yet.